All right, Super Stitch Nation, we are gonna do some stapling. And the first thing you have to do when you staple stuff is make sure you have a nice clean workbench, because you do not want staples or razor blades or anything getting stuck underneath your brand new cover. We're gonna do a few of these here. Some of these are actually quite tricky, so this might be a longer video. But we'll start out with the easy one. This is the box pad that we have. And anytime you see an arrow or a Sharpie arrow that somebody has put on here, that means that's where the seam goes. The seam always needs to mount on the pad facing down or in an inconspicuous area so members and people don't have to see it. It's an aesthetic thing. So that seam goes on that end because of the Sharpie. Then I like to hang the pad off the edge of the table and get it on here. Now remember, the bottom doesn't matter that much. So if the foam has shrank or for whatever reason, the pattern doesn't fit too well, you get that excess stuff down to the bottom. Okay, now here too, we want to make sure the seam is riding right on the corner of that foam. And this one isn't quite in the right spot. See how that doesn't look right? It's probably because whoever sewed this might have had a larger seam allowance than usual. However, the good news is when this pattern is traced out, it's traced with the stretch going the short way. So we got a little trick for that. Now that I screwed up my placement here, put this on here. And this one's only gonna fit so well. Once the foam kind of distorts like that, there's only so much you can do. But you do want to try to get it horizontal if you can. So that looked pretty good right there. So I'm just gonna tack that down. I like to put one staple per inch. Saves me from having to tear down a lot next time around. So you can just pinch this and pull that seam right where you want it. And you can do that over here too. Just stretch it. This one's actually pretty good. Now this outside back isn't as wide as the pad, so I got kind of close there. You don't want to staple too close to the edge. Now we'll go ahead and get our corners nice and tight, and we'll do a couple of different pleats just to show you what we can do. Let's see here. I like getting my straights first. Just one staple in that pleat. So it's center, left, and then right. So 3 staples per pleat. This will make your teardown go a lot faster in the future. Then we want this to be as straight as possible. Again, can't do much, foam shrank, not much we can do about that. Now the bottom side, maybe we'll try something different. Nobody's really gonna see this. So I'll do still 2 pleats, I guess. 3 staples. And since I did it that way on that side, I'll do it again on this side. This is a pleat I don't use very often. Now, this outside back technically doesn't need any brad nails in it because once it's bolted on, it will stay in place. However, if you slap a couple of brad nails in there, it'll make it easier for the guy that's putting the equipment back together. See that hole right there? I put mine under here so nobody will see those holes. It looks like the factory did that on most of them. But sometimes if it's a multi-adjustable back pad, you really got to get 2 in the top corner. So this is ready to be bolted on. Next pad is going to be an ankle roll. I like to collect these baggies from the grocery store. Eat a lot of broccoli and asparagus. And I tell people that's because I try to be healthy, but really it's just because I need the bags from the store because they work perfect for this. Again, the stretch has been sewn to go around the roll, so this thing should have some stretch. And just slide right on there. Sometimes it won't go all the way, and you can take a little spray silicone here. It's pretty slick. So, got that hole there. I want to get this thing on right. Another thing is I like this little flap underneath the seam. Sometimes it's actually on there correctly, but sometimes you'll have a situation where it'll be running on the left side and then whoop, it jumps over to the right side. So before I go ahead and staple this thing on, I'll take a flathead screwdriver in there and just smooth that thing out. That way it looks good. And I like it to be about the same amount on each side. Okay, there it is. So we're gonna do one staple on the seam. Then we're gonna do one staple on the other side. We'll get right up on there. Then we'll do one staple there. So we're gonna have 4 of these. Like that. Then what we're gonna do is we're gonna come back and pleat this thing like that. And then you really want that staple. Actually not like that. What I found is you really want it in the meat of the pleat like that. What you don't want is like that. If you do that, you'll come back in 4 months and this thing will just be flapping around and you'll have to pull it out and restaple. And I don't overlap these pleats. It kind of makes it a little too thick. And I try not to make them overlap this way either. Like if these two were going like that. And to be honest with you, normally what I'll do is I'll do these 4 and then I'll come back to this side and then I'll do 4 on this side and then I do all the pleats. And that's just because if I pulled one side too tight and there's only 4 staples holding it in that one side, I can still just Popeye the Sailor Man that thing right on there. Okay. Oh, see that? You don't ever want that. That was probably because my workbench wasn't clean. Looks like this air pressure is just perfect. It's not shooting the staples too far in there. So there it is. This should have no problem staying on and should be really easy to tear down the next time. All right. This is just a simple slip cover. Most of our slip covers are designed to do just that, slip on. You can staple them on, but then that just means more staple pulling in the future. So we have 4 bolt holes here. We're gonna have to cut out once the cover's on. And again, this thing was sewn so the stretch is going this way, so it'll stretch right on here. Want to make sure it's right in the center. See that? That's no good. No bueno. Nah, too far the other way now. Okay, there we go. And don't worry about the fact that this doesn't sit down. Once it gets bolted on, it will start to go down. Sometimes I will put a couple of staples on either side of these bolt holes. Depends how old the foam is, how beat up it is. But you definitely have to cut out your bolt holes. And this is, I think, if I remember correctly, the steel on this thing is about 2 inches wide and about 6 inches long. You can even double these up. Some clubs, they don't have that many preacher curls, so they just get beat real fast. This will be the first thing to tear in a health club. So I put 2 of these on. The second one, sometimes I have to staple it. But then the manager can just come in, instead of calling us out for one slip cover, you can just cut that slip cover off and keep going. So that's ready to go. Okay, we'll do this flat bench. Now, flat benches are flat benches. And we used to put a head cover because the head cover would prevent a crack on the side of the pad, but then what would happen is a member would use this thing and they'd put it back incorrectly. Typically you have like a dumbbell rack and people will face the dumbbell rack and lean back. But then next thing you know, a member puts the flat bench back this way and then this side cracks. So then we started putting a head cover on each side of this thing and then it would just crack in the center. So I stopped doing head covers on the flat benches. If the customer wants it, I'll definitely do it for them, but hadn't seemed to be too helpful. Okay, so we have 2 seams on this. We have a nice seam. I don't know what I call it a nice seam. And then we have this other seam. I've been calling it a fold seam. It's kind of ugly, but I try to get this facing down if you can. On a flat bench, there's no way to do that. But this is the conserved material in the shop. Sometimes you will just have a long piece of boxing. But the point is, I like to get the fold seam on last. I get all my other seams in place and then I put down the fold seam. That's just the way I do it. So we'll get this thing on here like this. And we'll get this like that. Okay. Make sure that seam is nice and now there's a couple ways to do this. I like to do the center here. Again, 1 staple per inch is fine. So I'm looking to make sure this thing is correctly placed before I go and do the rest of it. Oh, dang it. Those are scary. From that point, you can just start ripping now. Also, you don't always have to look down at the seam. If you keep the boxing relatively straight to the edge, you should be fine. All right. We're just gonna do a standard pleated corner. Whoop, out of bullets. Okay. Now I've been doing this a while. For you, it's not going to go this fast. Can use the back of the gun as a hammer. Not so recommended. This used to be an old Rainco. This is a Keystone knockoff. They make a lot of plastic on here now, so it's not the best habit. The old school ones that my dad had were all steel, so you can just wail on that bad boy. All right. Outside back. So we're probably gonna do 4 would have been fine. We're gonna put 2 in for extra good measure. So it should be pretty straight from over there. All right, now we're gonna get into some more custom stuff. This is the Precor Discovery Row chest pad. And it's got a real funky pattern, and I struggle with this just about every time, so let's see if I get lucky today. Also, as a side note, not necessary, but if you want to, sometimes you can trim off the seam allowance on these, and it might make it easier. Not so much on this pattern, but on the Techno Gym leg extension seat, the front seat, that is actually quite helpful to do. In the Precor Stretch Trainer knee pad, that helps out a lot as well. Now we're gonna need a heat gun on this. A lot of upholsterers use steamer. If you've been doing upholstery, I'm sure you've used one before. The heat gun is actually a little bit faster. It heats up the material faster. It itself heats up right away. But since there's no water coming through there, no steam, you can actually burn the vinyl and damage the vinyl. So you have to be good at being able to gauge how much more heat that vinyl can take before it starts to burn. Now that laid on pretty nice the first time, so we might have gotten lucky. And we'll see how this goes. I'm gonna try to keep my staples away from the corners for now. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Just gonna go 2 in the middle. We're getting lucky here. Just 2 on that side. Okay, so now that the seam looks pretty good all the way around, now my concern is pleats and such. This outside back is probably going to be smaller than the pad, as usual, standard pre-core stuff. So we can't staple too close to the edge, plus there's a bunch of foam overhanging, and we got to shoot into the wood. So what we're going to do is we're going to heat this up. And I recommend constantly pulling on it while you're heating it, because you'll feel it loosen up as you're heating it. And then you'll kind of eventually get an idea of how hot is hot enough. And that's what we're going for. No pleats, that's our goal. In fact, I'm going to do the opposite end. Sometimes I like to do a corner and then I do the opposite end. Then I'll go to another corner and do the opposite. Sometimes, I don't know why, maybe it's just because I'm right-handed, but I like to do center staple and then do the right side of the pleat, or the corner rather. There are no pleats on this one. And I feel like I'm pulling it and then I'm pulling it back until it pleats, and because I don't want to pull it back too far, it'll pleat. Then I'll come in here and cut just a little relief cut down there like that. Cut that excess off. And that little relief cut right there really helps it when I'm going back around the left way. See that there? And I'm not even gonna, I didn't even reheat that thing. I'm not gonna reheat this one either. Now you could, if you wanted to, you could reheat it. You won't need as much heat, but okay. So that's one thing you want to keep your eye on. Sometimes if that's happening a lot, it's because your air compressor's got too high a PSI. These guns typically run between 60 and 80 PSI. I think that's just doing that since the vinyl was hot. But you know what we'll do real quick, just so you can maybe get a close-up of this, is we'll see how long it takes for this to actually burn. See it's starting to change? The texture is changing. It's gonna start smoking here in a minute. Now there is no texture, now it's burning. So you got some time. You mainly just gotta watch that texture. Okay, now comes the moment of truth. Let's see if our staples are hidden. Ta-da. Man, look at that. Looking good, okay. 2 more and then we're done. So, we had a little oops. Justin made a mistake in the office. This order came in via photos, so I had to do some guessing, and I guessed wrong. This is a Precore Discovery multi-adjustable seat. This is also the same, but this is for a carry-in. So we're gonna see if we can get this on here. Now you should always double check your patterns to your pads before you tear them down, or you're gonna be in my predicament right now. And if you don't have any vinyl or you don't have any sewing machine, then you're in a world of hurt. I actually noticed this before I turned it down, and I'm a little overconfident at times. So I thought we're just gonna do this for the sake of the video. Now, this is another time that cutting off that seam allowance works. See all that junk right there? You just get rid of it. Just don't cut that thread, or else you're really gonna be in a world of hurt. Here we go. Okay. So let's see how we can get this thing on. So I like to do the nose first. Ooh, feels close. Okay. Whew. Man, look at that. Got about 1/8 of an inch. Just barely enough. Get this thing out of here. Whew, we're cutting it close. Okay. Man, that looks good. So if we hadn't have cut that extra material away, this would have looked a little lumpy. In fact, I wish I wouldn't have done it on the other side. Then we can have like a comparison. Now I'm gonna do one of those, one of those. Here's the other good news. It's got a huge plastic cap. Outside back, I should say. That's gonna afford us a little bit of grace. Oh man. Okay. Now, since I'm kind of halfway into foam here, I'm doing more staples. Whoo! Okay. Okay, that made me feel better. Cool. Now we don't have to come back for a second trip. No second trips. That's the name of the game. We don't want any go backs. Drive time is the killer when you're doing this mobile upholstery bit. Now we got a lot of staples in there, but at least we don't have to make a second trip. Hey. Okay, just probably 2. Just keep that thing down. Okay. Now this one is actually made for this pad. This is what the pad is supposed to look like. And I don't think we need to do it because we already did the tough one, and that's about it. We're done.